But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but struck his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. In today's gospel, we see two who went to the temple to pray. And yet it is very obvious that these two prayers are very different. The difference between the prayer of the Pharisee and that of the tax collector. The Pharisee's prayer is not really a prayer at all. It is only an expression of his self-satisfaction. It's all about him. The tax collector's prayer honors God because the tax collector admits that he needs God and he humbles himself before him. What kind of prayer do you and I say? It should be very obvious. You and I should be like the tax collector every day. Not imitating his sin, of course, but always having a contrite heart. Admitting that we need God all the time. Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. If there is something that we can offer to Jesus at the end of the day, even if we fail in everything, we can always offer a humble and contrite heart. In the book of Psalms, a humble and contrite heart, O God, you will not spurn. So we can always offer something to God at the end of the day, no matter how miserable our failure. But we should always have a contrite heart every day. Our prayer should be like this in the book of Psalms. O Lord, my heart is not proud, nor haughty my eyes. I have not gone after things too great, nor marveled beyond me. Truly I have set my soul in silence and peace. As a child has rest in its mother's arms, even so my soul. A humble and contrite heart, O God, you will not spurn. We need to be needy before God. We need to admit that we need His love, His attention all the time. And we have met needy people. And sometimes it's hard to listen to needy people who want to grab on your ear. But God wants us to be needy for Him and to recognize that we need Him at every moment of our day. We need to be humble. God exalts those who are humble, and He humbles those who exalt themselves. Which one are we? The more humble we are, the more we walk with God and depend on Him who guides us rightly. The more self-satisfied we are, the more we depend on ourselves and end in trouble. Not that we don't do anything, not that we can glory in the good things we do, but we have to admit that they come from God first. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord, because the Almighty has done great things for me. So we humble ourselves. We don't lag behind as if we are lazy about following God, or we don't pretend that we can't do it, which is false humility. But we don't step ahead of God either. We don't try to tell Him what to do with His plans for our life. God is in charge. So the middle ground is we walk with God. He takes the lead. We're right with Him. And we follow close behind with great affection. The more humble we are, the more God gives us. And He gives us to overflowing. His love, His grace, His power, so that we're not afraid, so that we imitate Jesus better. But before we can be full of God, we have to be empty of ourselves. So let us let go of our self-ego, our selfish pride. Let it go. Hang it up. The more we are full of ourselves, the less room we have for God. We should always say, "O Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner," every day. The more we give ourselves to God, the more He gives Himself to us, to overflowing, pressed together, shaken and pressed together, poured out onto our laps, overflowing. And that, my brother and sisters, that is why the saints were so joyful, because they were filled with God. There's no other way to do it. Do you and I want to find true joy in our life? Let us fill ourselves with God. And being filled with God, then we are able to give His kind of love to the least of our brothers and sisters. So 2 challenges for you. Number 1, open your heart, humble yourself, and let God in. And number 2, seeing that God has such great compassion for you, you in turn seek the least of your brethren, and you imitate Jesus Christ to them. Don't treat people like you don't have time for them. Don't treat others, no matter who they are, like second-class citizens. You and I are called to perfection, to imitate the love of Jesus. Love one another as I have loved you. I want to read a story to you from Mother Teresa. She said this: "Once when I was in New York at a chapel at one of our AIDS homes, there was an AIDS patient who had to go to the hospital. He said to me, 'Mother Teresa, you are my friend. I want to speak to you alone.' So the sisters went out and he spoke. And what did this man say? This was someone who hadn't been to confession or received Holy Communion in 25 years. In all those years, he had had nothing to do with Jesus. And this man told me, 'You know, Mother Teresa, when I get a terrible headache, I compare it with the pain that Jesus had when they crowned him with thorns. When I get that terrible pain in my back, I compare it with Jesus when he was scourged. When I get that terrible pain in my hand and feet, I compare it with the pain of Jesus when they crucified him. I ask you to take me back home. I want to die with you.' I got permission from the doctor to take him back home with me. I took him to the chapel. I have never seen anybody talk to God the way that young man talked to him. There was such an understanding love between Jesus and him. After 3 days, he died. It is hard to understand the change that young man experienced. What brought it about? It was probably the tender love the sisters gave him that made him understand God loved him. Go and do the same." But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but struck his breast, saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." God bless you.